Here's something that might surprise you. Idaho is bigger than all of New England combined, yet it has fewer people than the borough of Brooklyn. At first glance, that might sound like Idaho is empty, untouched, and forgotten. But the truth is more surprising. Idaho is actually one of the fastest growing states in the country. In 2024, the population finally crossed the 2 million mark. And yet, when you spread those 2 million people across all 83,000 square miles of land, you get one of the lowest population densities in the entire United States. Only a handful of states have fewer people per square mile, even though many of them are growing slower. Most of Idaho's growth is packed into a few urban centers like Boise, while the rest of the state remains wide open, quiet, and rural. Some say it's the geography. Others point to the economy or the lifestyle people here have chosen to keep. So today we're going to ask the simple question: why do so few people live in a place this big, this beautiful, and this quickly growing? Geography. One of the biggest reasons Idaho remains so sparsely populated is its rugged landscape. Idaho is a Rocky Mountain state, shaped by snow-capped ranges, steep canyons, rushing rivers, and vast lakes. All beautiful, but not easy to build on. In northern and central Idaho, the land is especially mountainous, with sharp elevation changes and V-shaped valleys that leave little flat ground for towns or roads. Some peaks rise over 12,000 feet, and the surrounding slopes are so steep and rocky that development is nearly impossible in many areas. Much of Idaho's terrain features outcroppings, high relief, and uneven ground, making large-scale building or dense housing simply not practical. And then there are the protected lands. Over 2.3 million acres belong to the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness, the largest wilderness area in the lower 48 states. By law, these lands are kept wild and untouched, which means no roads, no towns, and very few people. That's why most of Idaho's population is clustered in the Snake River Plain down south, where the land is flatter, easier to farm, and historically served as a natural pathway for westward migration. So even as the state grows, the sheer size of Idaho combined with its dramatic, undevelopable landscape ensures that most of it will stay open, quiet, and largely uninhabited. Climate. Idaho's wild, mountainous land already makes much of the state hard to settle, but the weather adds another layer of challenge. Because the state is so large and varied in elevation, Idaho has more than one climate type. Down south, the air is dry. It's a semi-arid climate with long, hot summers and cold winters. In the north, it's cooler and wetter, with a more continental feel and heavy snow in the higher elevations. Some regions, especially in the west, are influenced by the Pacific, bringing more moisture and cloud cover. Summer temperatures can soar past 100 degrees in the south, while winter can drop well below freezing across the state. In mountain areas, roads sometimes close from snow or ice, and in winter, cold air can get trapped in valleys for days during something called an inversion. While violent storms like tornadoes are rare, the cold, fog, and long winters can still wear people down, especially newcomers used to milder places. So between the sharp terrain and the tough seasonal swings, much of Idaho stays quiet, with most people choosing to live in the few areas where the weather is just a little easier to handle. Natural resources. So between the steep land and the challenging weather, Idaho has never been an easy place to build big cities, but it has always been rich in something else: natural resources. Idaho is known as the Gem State for a reason. It's home to over 70 kinds of precious and semi-precious stones, plus minerals like silver, lead, and phosphate. In the 1800s, mining brought waves of settlers to the state, but they didn't come to build cities. They came to dig. Most mining towns were small, temporary, and far from other communities, popping up only where valuable materials were found. Agriculture followed, especially along the flat, fertile Snake River Plain, where Idaho became famous for its potatoes and trout. But farming and ranching take up a lot of space and don't require many people. You might see thousands of acres of farmland with just a few families living there. So from the beginning, Idaho's economy was shaped by industries that spread people out, not pull them together, and that pattern still shapes the state today. Economic structure. Agriculture remains the backbone in many areas, especially along the Snake River Plain, where Idaho grows nearly a third of the country's potatoes. Farming, ranching, and food processing bring in a big chunk of the state's income, but they don't require many workers per square mile. In rural regions, it's not uncommon to find wide fields or open grazing lands with only a handful of people nearby. Other industries like forestry and mining have the same pattern. Large amounts of land, but few permanent jobs in one place. Meanwhile, higher density jobs in healthcare, technology, and advanced manufacturing are mostly found in growing cities like Boise. That means the state's economic growth isn't evenly spread, but instead concentrated in small pockets, while much of Idaho stays quiet and rural. Even as sectors like tech and tourism expand, they don't fill in the whole map. They build up around specific hubs and scenic spots. So while Idaho has a strong, growing economy, it's still shaped by industries that naturally support fewer people across a much larger space. Income and cost of living. Idaho's economy may be growing, but wages here are still modest compared to national figures. In 2023, the median household income was about $74,900. That's 3.6% lower than the U.S. average. The average weekly wage in 2025 was $1,175, placing Idaho 20th among all states. But when adjusted for cost of living, it jumps to 5th in purchasing power. That's because Idaho is still relatively affordable, especially when it comes to housing, utilities, and property taxes. For example, housing in Idaho Falls costs over 40% less than the national average, and towns like Meridian and Nampa continue to draw families looking for more space at a lower price. But this financial appeal doesn't lead to packed neighborhoods or high-rise buildings. Instead, many newcomers are seeking a slower pace and more personal space, a lifestyle away from the density they left behind in places like California. So, while affordability is a strong pull factor, it actually reinforces Idaho's spread-out settlement pattern, concentrating new growth in specific regions without significantly raising the state's overall population density. In the end, Idaho's cost of living may help attract people, but it attracts the kind of people who still want things to feel small, quiet, and open. Job market. Idaho's lower cost of living is attracting more people, but the real question is, where are the jobs? As of May 2025, Idaho's unemployment rate was just 3.6%, well below the national average, and the state added over 22,000 non-farm jobs in just 1 year, a sign of a strong, expanding economy. But here's the catch. Almost all that job growth is happening in cities. Urban counties like Ada and Canyon have added tens of thousands of jobs over the past decade, while many rural counties still haven't recovered from the last recession. Younger, working-age people are moving toward the cities for better opportunities, while retirees and older adults are settling into quieter, less populated towns. In fact, a study predicted that nearly 9 out of every 10 new Idaho residents would end up in urban areas, a trend that's still continuing. That means while some areas are booming, vast parts of the state remain untouched by new jobs, new homes, and infrastructure. So even as Idaho grows, the growth is focused in just a few places, leaving most of the state just as wide, wild, and quiet as ever. Transportation network. The state has nearly 60,000 miles of roads, and over 50,000 of those are in rural areas, winding through mountains, forests, and valleys. In many parts of Idaho, personal vehicles are the only real option. 83% of people drive to work, and most drive alone. But keeping those rural roads open is tough. Harsh winters, steep terrain, and long distances mean constant repairs and high maintenance costs. Nearly 1 in 5 bridges in Idaho has been rated structurally deficient or outdated, and close to half the roads are in poor or mediocre condition. Public transportation is almost non-existent outside of Boise, so if you don't have a car, you're likely staying put. Meanwhile, in fast-growing cities like Boise and Idaho Falls, older 2-lane roads are now handling rush-hour traffic they were never built for. So whether you're in a crowded city center or a snowy mountain pass, the state's infrastructure reflects and reinforces a spread-out, car-dependent lifestyle. And because building a modern transit system across such a vast and rugged landscape would cost a fortune, Idaho's wide-open spaces will likely stay that way. Healthcare. Today, over 98% of Idaho faces a shortage of primary care doctors, and more than 95% of the state lacks enough dental professionals. This is especially tough for rural residents who are often older, sicker, and less likely to have good insurance. They also face more barriers to healthy living, like fewer grocery stores, fewer fitness options, and long drives just to reach a clinic. As a result, people in remote areas are more likely to die early from major illnesses like heart disease or cancer. While the state is working on solutions, like partnering with local providers and expanding preventive care, progress is slow in the areas that need it most. For aging adults and families with health concerns, that lack of access becomes a strong reason to move closer to cities. It's not just about convenience, it's about survival, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing help is nearby. So once again, limited services in rural areas pull people toward urban centers, deepening the divide and keeping most of Idaho's land quiet and sparsely populated. Education. Just like healthcare, education in Idaho can look very different depending on where you live. In remote or rural areas, families often rely on the Idaho Digital Learning Alliance, an online program that gives students access to quality lessons, no matter how far they are from the nearest school. It's considered a national leader in digital education and helps fill in the gaps where physical schools are few and far between. Still, online classes can't fully replace in-person teachers, sports, libraries, and social life that students in cities often take for granted. Idaho's education system uses tools like the ISEE data program to help plan and improve long-term, but growth comes fast, and schools can get overcrowded. In high-growth cities like Meridian or Boise, schools are struggling to keep up with rising enrollment. Meanwhile, in rural areas, shrinking class sizes or even school closures make it harder to attract young families. Many parents choose to move closer to urban centers where schools are larger, more stable, and offer more opportunities. Housing problems. Compared to places like California or Washington, Idaho's homes are still relatively affordable, especially in cities like Nampa or Meridian. But that's changing fast. Since 2020, rents in Boise have jumped nearly 40%, pricing out many longtime residents. The rising demand in just a few popular areas has made housing more competitive and costly. Programs like Idaho Housing offer assistance and vouchers to help families stay afloat. But resources can be limited as growth outpaces supply. Meanwhile, in rural parts of the state, homes may be cheaper, but jobs, schools, and services are much farther away. That makes it harder for many people to choose rural living, even if the land itself is wide open. So once again, population growth piles up in certain places, where housing, though less affordable than before, still offers more convenience. And the rest of the state? It stays quiet, open, and mostly untouched, not because no one wants to live there, but because the support systems just aren't in place. Locals. Now, let's talk about something a little more personal: the people. Idahoans are known for being kind, but also a bit reserved. In small towns, there's a strong live and let live culture where privacy is deeply valued. It's not that people are rude, they're just not always quick to open up to outsiders, especially if those outsiders seem ready to change things. You might even see bumper stickers that say, "Don't California my Idaho." That's not just a joke, it's a reflection of a tension that's been building for years as more and more people move in, especially from the West Coast. In 2023 alone, 17,000 Californians moved to Idaho. That's a big shift in a state with just over 2 million people. Some longtime residents feel overwhelmed, worried that the quiet lifestyle they treasure could be lost. But here's the truth: if you come with respect and a willingness to listen and adapt, most Idahoans will return that respect. Maybe not with a red carpet, but with something better: real, lasting neighborliness. It's boring. To folks coming from big cities, Idaho can feel a little slow. It's a paradise if you love hiking, fishing, and open skies, but nightlife? Entertainment? Outside of Boise, it's pretty quiet. In some small towns, when you search online for things to do, the internet might come up empty. That's not an accident, it's part of the lifestyle here. Things move slower, people enjoy the peace. And while that might feel boring to some, it's exactly what others are looking for: calm, safety, and simplicity. Even the crime statistics are quiet, low numbers, not much drama. It's not a place for fast-paced living, and that's the point. For many, that slower rhythm is the very reason they come and stay. Idaho's population will keep growing, but mostly in the same few urban areas. The rest of the state, especially rural regions, may continue to shrink and age, facing fewer jobs, fewer services, and fewer young people. Without major change, the rural-urban divide will only deepen, and much of Idaho will remain quiet, vast, and sparsely populated. If we want to understand this pattern, or shift it, We have to look at everything: geography, economy, lifestyle, and what people are really looking for. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful or have your own thoughts about Idaho's future, drop a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're curious about how other places live and grow, be sure to subscribe. We'll see you in the next story.